Howdy everybody. I pray you had a wonderful week. I have this chunk of oak. A couple weekends ago, a friend of mine called me up and said they are taking down a water oak that had some sort of cancer on it, or it was dying. So it was very spalted already, which is really cool because you don't have to wait for any of that spalting to happen. And so it was, all of it was spalted. I still have a ton to finish cutting up into bowl blanks, but I really was anxious to get this piece on the lathe. I plan to give this bowl to the father of the girl who gave me the tree, because he helped load it up in the trailer and everything. So anyways, I'm roughing it out. It ended up being around 16 inches, kind of, sort of, after I cut it with a chainsaw. I'm still working on my chainsawing skills to get these better rounded out. So it's kind of a rough go until I start getting it better rounded. So as you notice, I just used a new gouge that I purchased. I did make a video on how I made the handle for it, but I'm not finished with everything I want to do with that video, so that should be coming up here soon, so keep a lookout for it. It's a 3/4 inch bowl gouge, Robert Sorby, that I got off Amazon. The links for that tool is in the description below too. But anyways, I'm just roughing out this piece, and it still has bugs and things like that in it. And it's still very wet, and it's hard as heck. I'm almost kind of second guessing if it's water oak, because I've turned water oak before and it's a little softer, but I'm not sure. I'm not absolutely positive what kind of oak it is. It did smell like rotten pickles. Kind of has a mixture of Worcestershire sauce, or Worcestershire sauce, however you say it, and pickles. Kind of vinegary, but an old vinegar smell, I guess. But anyways, it's funny how these things smell. It's been sitting on my table now for about 4 or 5 days, and it still has a slight smell to it. So it's kind of crazy how rich the smell is. I knew that most of these bowl blanks I have, I plan to rough turn them, let them dry, and then finish them on the lathe once they dried. But I wanted to kind of see how this wood would react. And I mean, I've turned so much oak. I actually learned how to turn on oak, and I had oak for a long time. And then I remember the next piece of wood I ever turned after oak was cedar, and I was just, wow, blown away. And so I know oak is a very, it's a very hard wood, and when it dries, it warps pretty good. So I did expect warping and even cracking in this piece. And looking back, I could have turned it a little thinner. I'm not sure if that would have made a big, huge difference with this oak on whether I have cracks or warping in it now, but I'll show you later on in the video and what I plan to do with it. I want to thank everybody for your prayers and your well wishes and your thoughts, and even checking in on me while I was sick last week. I just had a really rough week. I think my cold had turned into a flu, and not really completely over it. It just seems to just linger. These colder months are usually rougher on me anyway. When turning green wood from start to finish in one shot, in other words, not waiting for it to dry, and you're turning it green, and you plan on doing the final thickness of it right then and there, it's best to establish your rim thickness pretty quickly, and as you go, focus on your outer edges more than hollowing out the center, because as the wood dries, that rim is going to start to warp on you like immediately. So you'll see that I'm focusing more on getting that rim established as I go down and just hollowing out kind of as I go. And so it's kind of opposite than what you would do for dried wood. As I'm hollowing and getting my rim thickness established as I go, I'm trying to do slight finishing cuts, on the rim, so that way I won't have to go back while it's kind of wonky and then, make it where I have to sand all my tool marks out instead of just being able to give them a fine cut. I've always had a hard time doing a shear cut on the inside of bowls with any gouge. I can do it with scrapers and whatever else. So you'll see here I get a catch. I slow it down so that way you can see, and I turn my lathe off with my gouge because I don't want to step in front of it in case it's splitting. It was a little chunk, looked like it was kind of a weird catch because there was no evidence in the wood other than in that piece where I caught, but I do have a really hard time doing shear cuts on the inside of bowls no matter what. I don't know why it's one of those, it's just my kryptonite. I can't seem to get that movement down pat, or maybe I'm too much of in a hurry. I don't know. Eventually, I guess practice makes perfect, but I rarely do shear cuts on the inside of the bowls because I get catches like 99.9% of the time. And so I kind of should have known better because one, the rim is kind of moving around on me, and like I always get catches by doing the shear cuts on the inside. So sometimes we just struggle with certain things. One of the things I don't like about this Laguna tool rest is the post itself has this weird oblonged part, and you can see it in the back end, but in the front end it sticks out just as much, and it actually sticks out further than what the tool rest sticks out. So that keeps you from getting close to your pieces, and it also gets in the way if you have larger bowls, so you can't get close enough to it. The tool rests are like a millimeter shy than what the normal posts would be. I guess it'd be an inch is like the normal tool rests for this size lathe, and it's like a millimeter shy. So my bowl rests that I purchased, they don't, I can't get them tight enough. I even spray painted them just to kind of like give them some thickness, and they still slip. And I don't want to be hollowing out a bowl and then have the tool rest slip down on me. I just fear hurting myself. Anyways, there's some bugs flying out of here as I'm turning, and I felt a few of them. Some of them were just flying out as I was turning, and some of them I had to blow out with an air hose. And right now I'm just digging out the bug poo. I opted out on using resin on these holes, number one, because the wood is still wet, and I was afraid the resin wouldn't, even in the 5-minute epoxy, would not stick very well. Plus, I did not want to have to take a tool to the back side of this bowl again because it's already wonky from it drying. It's very out of round, and it would just be more work and a heck of a lot more sanding trying to get out tool marks and stuff. So I decided to leave it natural, and it gives it character anyway. Now the way I dried this so that a way it'd be a little easier to sand was I took my heat gun, and for about, I don't know, about 20 minutes I just sat there and let it turn while I dried it. It was a pretty large bowl, so that's why it took 20 minutes. I didn't meter the moisture, I just kind of felt it and seen how it felt. And it was kind of cold outside anyway, so everything kind of felt just cold and wet. So I don't really have a gauge that I go by. I could have metered it, but I just decided not to on when to stop. I guess when you stop seeing the water coming up on the outside of it through the end grain, because sometimes you can actually see the water coming out as you dry it from the inside and as it's turning. So about 20 minutes with the heat gun. You can spray it and just wet sand it if you like. There are several people who I know that have told me that they just wet sand the pieces. So they just keep the piece wet with the spray bottle the whole time, even during turning. And that does help too with, the rim issue when you're turning the rim, because the water is staying, you just continually feeding it moisture, so it keeps it from moving so much on you, in other words. So that's an option too, is just wet sanding, keeping the piece wet the whole time. I chose to go ahead and dry it, and sanding it down all the way to 400 grit, and I just used a food safe finish on it because I wanted the person to be able to put fruit in it, or apples or things like that. Throughout the finishing process of this bowl, because there's these little pinholes, wormholes. Some of them go all the way through, and some of them are just, very shallow. I'm using my air compressor to get out all of the wax and stuff like that from those little pinholes. If you don't have an air compressor, you can always use those air duster cans that you can buy at Walmart. They work really well. Before my air compressor was accessible, I had bought a bunch of those cans and used it to blow stuff out of holes and everything. So it works really well. If you don't have air compressor, you can always get those too. To remove the tenon, I have a few of these waste blocks that I have made up for all the different size chucks, jaws that I use. And as I also use them to glue pieces to turn them. They're really convenient to have. It's worth taking time to turn a few, so that way you can just grab them and go, instead of having to figure out how you're going to turn around, turn a tenon off something or what have you. Now I do want to tell you that after about 4 or 5 days of this bowl sitting on my table, I brought it in and put it underneath one of the vents because we were having our heat running. I wanted it to do its thing. In other words, I wanted it to crack, move, whatever, before I give it to the owner so I could decide what it is that I want to do with it before handing it over. So in the images that you'll see at the very end of the video, you will see the cracks that have developed in it since it's been turned. Those pretty much showed up the day after, and they're slightly bigger than what they were originally, but not too much. It kind of gives me an idea if the bowl's going to move anymore or not. So what I plan to do is take the black CA glue, the Starbond black, and fill the cracks and then sand it, just hand sand it. Not any of the holes or anything, just the cracks that occurred during the drying, and then just sand the bottom of it to where it doesn't, because it has a slight rock to it, not too bad. But that's what I plan to do with it after it's been sitting. And yes, I could have just turned it in a blank and then waited a few months to let it dry. But I don't mind having to do a little extra work to be able to give this bowl to someone sooner. So I guess you just do what it is that you feel that you want to do, and the wood's kind of unpredictable. So in most cases, or some cases, I guess, you can see the cracks towards the end grain, but this stuff has some beautiful grain pattern to it. Almost looks like rose petals in the side of it. It's really neat. But anyways, I hope that y'all have a blessed and wonderful weekend. I hope you enjoy the video, and take care and God bless.